So what I want to look at today is a little bit different, and it is how doing slides. And the background to it is that for the course I'm teaching on AI-assisted coding, I prepared some slides. I was not so happy with the quality of slides I had for a first instance, and then once happened and I kind of talked to them, I realized that this is an opportunity to do something better. And people are really excited. They said, "Oh, this is so cool! You should show us how you do it." So I thought that's what I'll do today. And the other reason is because I really think that, in many ways, a lot of what's becoming exciting now in agentic AI is not just coding, but also all these things where we can just use an agent to facilitate the actions and do it better and do it more efficiently. So that's the background to it, and I'll show you. I also put the slide, the skill for the slide up on GitHub, so you can take a look at it, or if you want to copy it and use it as a starting point or something like this, you are also very welcome. I put all of these things I always put as Creative Commons, really public domain for whatever you want. I think that it's more useful as an example and inspiration, but you can also just use it as is. And so I'll maybe do a little bit of a walkthrough for the skill and quite elaborate and describe how I ended up creating it this way. And then do a quick demo of using it to create some slides. And the slides that I created for the course, they look something like this. So maybe not the most amazing slides ever, but probably the best slides I've created ever, because I'm just not a very, very visual person. I'm not particularly good at these things. And so that's what people get excited about. So if we look at the skill here, it has this structure with a skill.md, of course, that describes the complete workflow. Assets that are bundled in the skill as a logo, which in the original is my own brand, but here I just put some random logo. CSS for styling and configuration. And it has a script for processing the images. Taking a look at the skill MB. So it's quite elaborate. We don't have to review every little bit, but just the general, obviously the skill front matter has the name and what it does and when to use it. The skill currently has all kind of customizable parameters. So I try to create it so that you can swap the color or the imaging style or the logo and specify it here. And there are different presets, and you can also enter a pretext. So these are just instructions for the agent how to interpret it and how to work through things and what information it should gather from me or any user. And then it just specifies the workflow, how to create these skills. It wants to use the user question tool. That's the thing that shows you a UI for answering different multiple choice questions for these parameters. And that's very convenient. I like using it in skills. It works well in Claude code, in open code, now also in GitHub Copilot. Not in everything else yet, but if not, it can always just use the chat to ask questions. And so it asks about the background color, image style, logo, and then keeps these as variables. Because it's a pretty long process, it makes sense to keep things around. It then has two options for image generation. So one thing I realized when using this skill is generating the images is the thing that takes the longest and is also most expensive. Sometimes I need to iterate as I review the slides. I just want to fix a typo or make some minor correction, but I don't want to regenerate. And so it gives you the option of not regenerating the images. Then it wants to create a slide V project. So slide V, which I knew a little bit about, but I researched when I created this skill, is a package that lets you create slides for HTML from Markdown. So you provide a Markdown file and it knows how to present them as nice slides or to export them as whatever PDF or PowerPoint format or any of these things. And this in itself comes with a skill. So I installed their skill, which is really very high quality. I reviewed it carefully, as I always do when I install skills from the internet, to make sure that it's legit. But it is very good, and it helped me agentically create my own skill relying on it. And here it has all these instructions how to initialize a project with Claude and install the different things to create the basic project. It then wants to configure a theme and the styles for my presentation. So SlideG is very configurable and kind of allows you to modify the layout, fonts, all kind of things like this. And so some of it is bundled in my skill with a config TS and with a CSS file. And some of it the agent can improvise or change while running based on instructions. It then wants to generate the slides. So the skill assumes that I'm providing some content. Maybe it's a document with information, maybe it is a specification slide by slide, maybe I even just ask it to do some research and create something. But it then specifies how it should create the Markdown file for the slide with some front matter that is read by slide V and the normal structure that I want to repeat for every slide. So there's a default layout. I could have multiple different layouts. Here I only have one, and it includes my logo and title and some information in one column and the image in another column. And there's a lot of information here for the agent to know how to do it correctly. This is all stuff I arrived at in iteration with the agent. So it's not that I had the genius to plan it all out, but I just iteratively tried something, look at the result, realized that I need more constraints or more instructions and improve the skill. And what was a few hours of work. Then we go to generating the images, the graphics. And I gave the instruction, use sub-agent. This is great because if we need to generate, 10 or 20 images, this is going to take quite a long time. And if I can do all of these images in parallel, there's nothing stopping me, then they don't have to be serialized. I can use sub-agents with agents that support it. So again, with Claude, it works well. With OpenCode, it works well. With Copilot, now has sub-agents. So any of the agent harnesses that have the ability to launch sub-agents saves me a lot of time just doing it in parallel. And yeah, so for each slide, it spawns a sub-agent. For generating a slide, it specifies things like the dimension and of the image, how to gather content for this, and then it gives instructions for my agent to prompt the image generator, which is Nano Banana in this case. And so it tells it you should deliberate on illustration ideas and read the content, identify the core concepts that need visual representation, brainstorm several distinct approaches, and then pick the best option. Again, this is something I arrived at through trial and error. This seems to work better than getting it to only generate one prompt. So I really instructed here to try different options, then reflect on them, and then use the one you think is best. And that's, by the way, an interesting thing to note here is this is a really good pattern working with agent, is having a reflection step. Not just one shot generating, but getting the agent to try different options, reflect on them, and pick the best one or make corrections. And so this is a pattern that you see a lot in agentic workflows and often produces better results, for sure at a higher cost. It means more iterations, more tokens. That's the price you pay for getting a better result there. Finally, construct the prompt. So here the agent will construct the prompt to send to Nano Banana and get it to generate the image. On Nano Banana, I also have a skill. This is also, I made it available online, and there are many others. And I'm just using it here. It's as a script for generating an image using the Nano Banana API. It provides the prompts, a file name, the resolution. Here, a relatively low resolution is good enough for my slides. What I do then is post-processing. So one thing I realized, again, through a lot of iteration, is that it's incredibly difficult to get a consistent background color from an image generator like Nano Banana or GPT Image or any of these. Even if you give them the exact color code or something like this, every time you get something a bit different. And I wanted to have this effect of a consistent color where it's an illustration on top of the background color of the slide. So after thinking about it a little bit, I realized that a good solution would be to always generate the images on a white background and then swap out the white background for whatever is the background of my presentation. And for this, I created a script. I didn't create a script, I asked my agent to create a script for processing the image and converting the white of the image to background, to transparent background, which is something that Nano Banana in itself cannot do for some reason. Again, tested the script, it works fine, it is included as part of the skill, and there are here instructions to run this immediately after the image is generated. And here there are some guides for how to prompt that the agent can use to prompt the Nano Banana. Just a template. And then the agent will, it's not scripted, the agent will read this and will use this to construct its own prompt. And there are many constraints are provided here. I don't want any text in the images. I want the image style selected by the user, and so on and so forth. Finally, after I have the presentation in Markdown and I have the styling in the format slide V likes, and I have the images all generated and post-processed so that they fit the background, I want to export the presentation to PDF in PowerPoint. And here I use the features of slide V to export. And so the instructions are included here. Again, this is not scripted. There are instructions for the agent. I prefer as much as I can to avoid scripting things, but instead to give instructions for the agent, because then it has more agility. It's able to improvise. It's able to adapt where it is needed. And it's building also an SPA, which I don't remember the acronym, but basically you can launch a small web server to run the slides in addition to PDF and PowerPoint. And finally, it creates a script for running this server, and it commits if it's in a repository, and includes many different constraints and things like this. So this is a really elaborate skill, but it encapsulates this complete workflow. Other things that are bundled in this skill is this script, which I alluded to for post-processing the image. It's a Python script. It was written by an agent with my guidance. It's fairly simple. It uses a Python library called LLM to do this processing. Just read the image and replace the white background with transparent background. And there are various assets that are bundles. Assets are things that are not for running, not for reading. The agent is never going to look at them unless it could read, and it just copies them over every time I use the skill. So there's the local SVG, there's the configuration or the formatting package that is being used by Lightv, and there is a basic CSS for my presentation. This is it. This is the scale. It is quite a lot. It took a bit of iteration to get it to a state where I was happy with it. But notably, I didn't write any of this code or any of the markdown. It was all through progressive iteration with an agent and with a little bit of research to understand what are my options, to know that Lightv is a useful package for creating things, creating the Nano Banana skill, using the skill for Lightv, which I downloaded, and so on. So yeah, this is the skill. It is on GitHub. I'll share the link to it, and you can take a look at it. And if you have any questions, feel free to chime in anytime. And if not, let's do a little demo. So I'll create here a temporary directory. And let's use Claude for this. It would really work with any agent that supports skills. Maybe let's start by something like research. Yeah, spare word, literature. There is a thing. Who's hard by C and GPT 3. That's a pretty current topic, which I guess is on everyone's mind. So we can use this as the content for our presentation. By the way, everyone already has some experience with these new models. It was a bit crazy how they both got released at exactly the same time, and now everyone is comparing notes and picking sides. So it did lots of research, I can see. And hopefully can create a nice little report for us, which we'll use as the content for our presentation. Okay, and then yep, nice report. I'm assuming is reliable and interesting. So let's use that. I will start a new session here. Something requires my attention. Oh, is it in the chat? What was the URL for the skill? I'll paste it in the chat. Just it. Why does it look so weird? Okay, so now I will tell it that we use the Sunday slide scale and its presentation using the content of and that will run it. You got the source content and it will want to gather preferences before building. So it's asking me what background color should the slides use. This is the Ask User Questions tool. I will tell it, let's say, and what is the image style we want? Maybe let's use retro pixel art. And the logo can be the default one, and I'll submit. So now it has enough information to start working on my slides. It's going to set up the slide view project, generate the slides.md from the content I provided, and then generate the slides and export them. So you can see it created here a project for slide view from the template. No need to understand all of it. I also don't know all the exact details of slide view and how it's structured projects. This is the first time I used it seriously, but it's a JavaScript, TypeScript project. So now it's generating the markdown for the actual slides. Can I take a quick look? So these are the slides. One separated markdown stands after the other with the front meta. And now it is generating the images. The images will be here. And it's starting to use these background agents to generate. And we have a nice pixel art for the first slide. And another one. And it's running in parallel, which saves some time. This is what I really like about sub-agents. Not making so much use of all the fancy customized sub-agents, but just being able to fan out a parallel task to multiple agents is something I find very, very useful. Just saves time. So now that it has the slides and it generated the images, it's going to generate the exports, the PDF and PowerPoint. All right. We can open this PDF and it created a presentation with this funny logo and the format that I like with pixel art images it generated for me. And it also has PowerPoint here, which is nice for presenting. So yeah, this is it. This is my slide skill. In terms of the effort required, it did take me like, I think, 2 or 3 hours to create it iteratively with an agent. At the same time, this unlocked the ability to create something that's nicer than I probably have ever created in my long career working in tech and in corporate environments where I was always really bad at guides. So to me, that's a wonderful thing that I can do it. And I think it's a nice demonstration of how you can use skills to build these complex workflows. So I had the slide V skill, which helped me because I don't know slide V, and it allowed the agent to learn how to use it. I had the nano banana skill, which I've already created before, but I couldn't use now. I could like slot it in and use it for one of the components. And then I created a skill for encapsulating the workflow. You have the link in the chat to the repository on GitHub if you want to take a look, and maybe it's useful to you. Hopefully some of you will be inspired and create things that are much nicer and next level from this. And if you do, please share. I'd be really curious. All right, with that, Mike, yes.
So this is really interesting. And I observe, I think 2 things I observe I want to kind of ask some details on. So first, you mentioned a couple times, I've always pronounced it slide dev, but I've never, I don't know. So I might just say slide dev instead of slide V, but
Yes.
You said slide dev skill, but I don't see anything in your skill referencing a slide dev skill directly. It seems to me you're using what I might call a slide dev CLI that's installed locally. But can you say, how did you use the slide dev skill?
Sure. So the slide dev skill helped me when I developed this skill, because I developed this all using an agent. I didn't write it all from scratch. And so I have the slide dev skill installed. And when I went to the agent and said, okay, we're going to start working now on creating a skill for generating slides, and I wanted to use slide V or slide F. You're right, this slide F. It already knew everything because it has the full reference. And it's a very nice skill. You should look at it. It's really a great example of how to create a skill for a complex product, because they have the complete references for everything and best practices. And
so you just put that into context when you built your skill, or is it also, are you expecting your skill to already just automatically find it and launch? In other words, is that sort of a dependency of your Sunday slides?
No, it isn't. So you say it's not invoking it anywhere because it already, it is a very specific workflow. But to build this workflow, the skill was sensible.
Okay. I don't see a lot of that in other than sort of you've got your templates for title and content, and then a bunch of layout rules, but I don't see any command. It's not obvious to me where it got the slide dev, the little headers, for example, that said, this is a content slide. And now you've got to do in other words, it output a very specific slide dev format. And I'm guessing for your skill knew about that. Maybe I am.
Because it had
I see it in the templates. Okay, I see it in the templates. Cool. That's all. Yeah, it just needed those. I see where that is. Okay. And then the second observation I have, you told it almost nothing about the content itself that it was supposed. I mean, you gave it a source content and just said, turn it into 5 slides. And there's very little guidance in your skill, it seems to me, about, I guess there's just, there's the slide template that says use main point and supporting details. I think it's interesting you didn't have to guide that in very much specificity about how to break down the content.
Sure, because I don't care right now. I'm just demoing. So the agent will always do something, and especially if it's like one of the best models like Claude Opus or GPT-5 that do pretty decent work, whatever you present to them. When I create slides for, my courses, it's obviously very pedantically gone over each slide and what I want the content to be exactly. And then I can give that through the agent and let it just do the layout. And
Right.
in this case, I didn't care. So I just wanted to create 5 slides so that we can look at them together.
So that work might be you would shape your own content and maybe do your own outline and bullets and so forth outside of this skill. And then this skill really just does the layout and formatting for you.
Yeah. For something I actually care about, like the content, when I give a talk or teach or something like this, I'm not going to rely on an agent to just write the content for me. I'm going to spend the time structuring the slides and what content I want to have in them. It's just that for this demo, it didn't matter so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So I don't know if there are any more questions on that. If not, we can go to the Slido and start looking at some of the questions there by order. Actually, you can present it to, if you make it easier to follow. So the first question is, I would love to see a demo of Claude Flow. I don't know it very well. I can open it just so that we look quickly. I took a quick look at it. There are tons of packages like this right now that people are publishing and making a lot of noise about on social media. I'm very skeptical about them because what I find, so really it's a package of configuration with lots of custom agents and some orchestration hooks. And the idea is that you download and install it, and then you'll have ultimate configuration for your Claude, or I think also for other agents, and you'll be able to do amazing things that you weren't previously able to do. I think that begs the question, okay, if this is the ultimate configuration, why isn't it included in Claude Code or in Codex? And I think the answer to that is that configuration is a very context-specific thing and a very personal thing. And downloading someone else's configuration isn't going to help you very much because you don't understand it very well. And so this is someone's workflow, not your workflow. So my recommendation with these things is always to approach it with curiosity, to go and read, look a little bit at the code, maybe ask an agent to help you dissect it and understand what they do. And then go and do your own configuration, because when you create your own configuration, first of all, it will simply glove to your needs, to your project or to your working style. And also, you'll have a better understanding. You'll have a mental model of how it works, which is really hard to develop when you download one of these packages. So this is what I do, basically. I very rarely download things like this wholesale and start using them because I wouldn't know what to do with it. But I try to learn from them and take inspiration. That's my recommendation. I would demo if I knew how to use this thing, but I have no idea. If someone else does, maybe I'd love to get their perspective or experience. Yeah, Roger. Roger, please, if you'd like to ask or say something, you're super welcome. Okay, maybe not. We'll get back to it later. And Slava, yes. Slava?
Hi, Lenore. Sorry, it took me a moment to allow the microphone permission. Thanks again for the session. I'm really excited to be here again. I have a question about the skill file. I've seen a post in Vercel blog saying that they managed to make the skill, or actually the MD file, work better than the skill because the skill is not necessarily being loaded in all sessions. So they showed like 70 or something percent of success rate, but when they indexed the reference they wanted into the agent file, they had shown the success rate. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so you're talking about the Vercel article. I think they were kind of stating the obvious. So what they said in the research and showed it quantitatively, which is always nice, always preferable to just having opinions, is that having everything already in context and is going to work better than progressively loading um, from a skill. And I think, yeah, obviously it is. The challenge then is that you're stuffing your context window with more and more content. And at some point, you're going to have to stop. Whereas when you're using skills, you can have hundreds of skills in your library and then load them progressively. And so I think it's a trade-off. It depends. When you need very reliable operation, then adding information about it in agents.md or Claude.md or wherever you have the initial context setting makes a lot of sense. And when you work interactively, when you can call the skills explicitly, or when you're okay for the agent to try a few times and maybe get it right and maybe not, you have that advantage with skills that they don't take so much context initially until they're loaded, and you can have a vast library of them.
Okay. Because I see also your posts in LinkedIn, you always refer to skills, and seems like a big thing. I want to capture the whole idea of skills properly.
Yeah, I mean, skills, I think they're a very big thing because they give you this ability to everything from workflows to references to behaviors, any way you want to customize your agent, you can capture in a skill. It's a very simple format. And you have this advantage of progressive loading, which I think you pointed out based on this research by Vercel, obviously is not as reliable as always having everything in context, but there's limits to how much you can have in context. So skills are incredibly powerful, and they will only get better because agents and the skill loading tool and the prompting around it, which with every version of the agents, it improves a little bit. This will continue getting better. So the skill that you're writing today will continue working and work even better with the next model release, with the next harness release. Definitely, I think that it's worth understanding skills and what they mean and what role they play in the world of agentic AI, and kind of starting to use and create them because they give you so much power and flexibility.
But thank you,
Hi, Eleanor. Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah, sorry about that. My mic wasn't working. I was jumping back to the point I just wanted to make about Claude Flow. I saw a post on LinkedIn that the creator of Claude Flow liked, but he was basically referencing the fact that Claude with Opus 4.6 and like what he demonstrates is the ability to fan out and orchestrate agents. Some of that functionality has been adopted and are now part of Claude. So that's good to see. It's much easier to sort of fan out and orchestrate the agents. So they are sort of adopting some of these ideas, which is cool. So if you like Claude Flow, then it's already part of the Claude framework. That's the point I wanted to make.
Have you used it? How are you finding orchestrating these many agents running in parallel?
Well, before you're asking about, if anyone had any thoughts about, Opus 4.6 versus the Codex 5.3, I basically was trying to have a big project with a lot of code, and it was basically migrating a machine learning model from one obscure language called Julia into Pipe, and Opus 4.5 was really struggling. I spent a couple of days trying to give it the right context to be able to convert code and run all the checks and verify that they were both consistent. And then I tried it with 4.6, and I don't know if it's because it's got a larger context window, it's a stronger model, or the ability to run multiple agents at the same time. It cracked it, and I was able to be successful. So I was kind of like blown away with the latest version of Opus. Like, I thought maybe I was pushing it beyond what it was capable of. But yeah, it was really good. It does use a lot of tokens, so it's more expensive. But for some of these really high cognitive load tasks, it performs really well.
Sure, but have you used these multiple agents running in parallel for this? Or
Within course, the Opus, yes. So it was automatically doing it. So that was the nice thing. So you didn't have to do a lot of configuration. I haven't used Claude Flow myself, if that's what you mean. But I was using it with Claude, with Opus.
okay, cool. Really curious to hear more about that. So the next one, yeah, the big question of this week: Cloud Opus 4.6 versus GPT 5.3 codecs. How do they compare? It's a bit too early to tell. I'm very, very impressed with GPT 5.3 codecs. Based on whatever experience I managed to get in the short time since it was released, it seems to be very strong for coding. There's usually this difference which keeps repeating in every new cycle of releases, where the GPT models tend to be more thorough, more precise, but also slower. And the Claude models tend to be more improvisational, a bit harder to control, but also faster and agile. And so to some extent, it's a matter of preference. We don't really have yet very good metrics and benchmarks on GPT 5.3 because OpenAI didn't make it available on the API. And so all the organizations that usually test it, like Artificial Analysis and LLM Arena and others, they don't have that yet. And Cloud Opus 4.6 for now tops the charts. I tried both. I have to say, I don't know, there were some things I didn't like so much about the new version of Opus. It does a lot more thinking. This is an area where Anthropic is catching up with OpenAI, with using more of these thinking tokens. It improves the performance. It's obviously more expensive and slower than the really last version, which is even more expensive. And it does seem to be a little bit of a regression in terms of steerability. I felt that 4.5 was actually better in this regard. But it's just my impression. The truth is they're both excellent models. You could pick one of them today and do amazing work, and so it doesn't matter so much, and use whatever you have access to. You have a ChatGPT subscription, they're now giving a lot of allowance for codecs for free. If you have the Claude subscription, you can use Cloud Opus and so on. And I guess in a couple of weeks, we'll probably know more as more real quantifiable evidence is gathered. The next one, to see a demo of God's Town by Steve Yegge. I can kind of repeat the same thing I said about Cloudflower. I looked at it. It's interesting. I'm not using it. I'm not really sure if it's worth using, except for as a kind of conceptual demonstration or something like this. Basically, what Gastown does is, again, another orchestrate lots of agents framework, which tries to use, let's say, the principles of economics to decide between them how much resources to allocate them. You hear a lot of exciting stuff, a lot of blog posts, a lot of tweets and podcasts. I have not heard what problem it actually solves to someone. So the way I try to think about these things is, what problem do I have that I'm not able to solve right now? And then look to the approach or the tool that allows me to solve it. And I just didn't think that this particular project is solving any problem I have. Most of the problem I have are solved quite easily by a single agent or a single agent with some sub-agents. I think that this scaffolding, like Godstown or others, is going to become less and less necessary. As Roger mentioned, this is already becoming apparent in the current version of code, where built in, they've included some orchestration of multiple agents, where they don't have this elaborate scaffolding, right? What they do is they just let the master agent schedule and control other agents. And I guess that will be more and more the approach. But if anyone used Gastown and has some experience, sure, I'd love to learn too, because I haven't used it. Right, moving on, can you give some insight how one could build an agent skill for context building and context managing? Not exactly sure how to parse this, and because in some way I see all skills being about context building and context managing, and context is this very abstract concept. So, for example, the skill we looked at earlier today is the context for running a workflow or creating slides. If anyone has some ideas kind of how to expand on this, let me know. If not, I'll move on. So from Mike, how so-called agent teams we just discussed. I don't have experience with it yet. I'm curious. My general impression is that I don't find that a lot of the problems I have require running lots of agents in parallel, but it is clearly the direction things are going, and so I'm definitely going to be learning a lot more about this and happy to share later on. But the Claude Agents SDK, and the various, there are many SDKs now. There's the Copilot SDK, which is more or less a copy of the Claude one. There's the Vercel SDK, which is excellent. I really love working with it. And I think it's definitely worth doing something with it and learning how to use it. So watch this space. And I think it's a good idea to do something about it and see how we can create these little agents for ourselves. Next one, how happens agents evolve with layer lens, LLM-as-Judge, and agent swarms compared to standard eval. So these are many different things. Swarms is really like yet another agent orchestration framework. I don't know it too well. It looks okay, but then I'm not really sure why people keep creating new ones. The ones we have are already quite good, but it seems okay and it looks very much like the stuff you have from Anthropic or OpenAI or Vercel or other providers. Layer lens. I looked at it briefly. Looks like another sort of eval tool. They focus more on benchmarking. It's good, I guess. It's if you're kind of evaluating models for, I don't know, for a huge enterprise procurement or something like this, I would look at it. And yeah, LLM-as-Judge is the technique where we use an LLM to evaluate the outputs of other LLMs. And it's tricky to get right, but it is possible and can allow us to automate some of the evaluation work rather than asking people to go and review LLM output. So I'm sure I completely understand the question, but this is maybe the difference between standard eval, as in standard, and standard might be something like having people go and annotate the output of the LLMs and grade it versus LLM-as-Judge. LLM-as-Judge is very efficient because you automate the work of humans. It's a bit tricky to get right and to build an LLM-Judge that is reliable, but there are techniques where you can do it based on some sampling of human input. Do you know of Goodfire's lab platform, Ember? Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know too much about Ember. I know that they're doing Mechanistic Interpretability, and they're trying to create it as a platform. Mechanistic Interpretability is the field of analyzing AI models and trying to understand how they work, how they decide what to generate. This is really important because by and large, we don't really understand how these models work. We just know that we can, through a process of learning, influence their behavior, but we don't always know of the billions and billions of parameters that are in the model, how exactly they interact. And there's been a lot of work from Anthropic primarily, also from the other labs, trying to find ways to peek into the models and understand what it is they're actually doing. And that's quite important if we are going to continue growing these models and relying on them more, and we want to understand how they work. And the Goodfire, they're building a platform for doing this. I don't know how good it is. I don't know enough about this field. And I guess this is only relevant for people developing very large and complex models, but definitely interesting. Next one, I read that Opus 4.6 is actually Sonnet 5, and this is why it can be so fast, and they're making much. That's interesting. So there are a lot of rumors around the release of Opus or Opus 4.6 that actually it's a smaller model, maybe more similar to the Sonnet models, but because they trained it so well, they can now claim there is a larger model, charge more money for it, and run it faster and charge even more. I strongly doubt that. I don't know. Obviously, they're completely opaque. We don't know what's going on. They don't publish information on the structure of the models, how many parameters, how they're being deployed. And so we are left guessing. But if I had to guess, I would say that probably not. Probably they're now focusing on Opus class models because the competition is so fierce for the best models for coding that they managed to make it a bit more efficient already in the last run and deploy it more efficiently and offer it a bit cheaper, about a third cheaper than it used to be. And with the fast model they're offering, I mean, there it's actually not so surprising that they're able to do this because this is about the deployment and inference. So if you, for example, reduce the batch size in inference, you could easily get much lower latency. It's just incredibly inefficient because it means that you have a large part of your GPUs in the memory not utilized. And so I guess there's a trade-off if people want to pay the crazy prices they're asking for the fast model, they can offer it. And it could well be that they have some other tricks. They have very good teams for model deployment, maybe using some older hardware that they can offer at a cheaper price, or maybe some tricks with adding more memory, who knows. But my guess is no, then probably don't have any deception like offering us a Sonnet class model, but probably just optimizing, playing a little bit with the prices to be competitive in the market and trying to stay competitive. The next one, the Vercel research casting out. But yeah, so this we just discussed the Vercel research about the effectiveness of skills. Again, I think people are reading too much into it. I think that it's obvious that they just quantified something that practitioners in general now, which is stuff that's already in the context, is going to be more reliable than something you need to load progressively using a tool. Having said that, you can't have everything in the context, and so skills still remain very useful. How do you respond to people with negative view of AI as stealing IP? Visual artists might anger at AI image generation for my slides. I don't know. I'm an engineer, not an ethicist, and I'm not the lawyer, and I don't understand enough about these things. I can tell you my understanding of how machine learning works, and especially with these very, very large generative models. It seems to me fundamentally quite similar enough to how people learn. And so when I go to the museum or when I browse different works on the internet, I learn about them. I cannot help myself by having some representation of them in my brain. And maybe one day when I need to create an image, okay, that's very unlikely because I'm very bad at the visual stuff. But if I had some visual skill, I will probably, you could attribute some of what I'm doing to having learned it from an image I saw somewhere. I don't see it the same as stealing, as in copying one-to-one, but I don't understand enough about this whole world of copyright and fair use to really have an opinion. I wonder what other people think, by the way, because this is really not an area where I have any serious expertise.
This was my question. I really appreciate the answer. And yeah, I don't think I'm an expert on it either. Yeah. I mean, I guess in my opinion, I think there's maybe too much copyright in the world. And I think it's good when people can learn and be inspired by other people. But, there is a system for the artists. I work with artists. And so this is just something I hear them say. And they definitely feel like, the system is very much now to their disadvantage, and they had sort of been led to a certain expectation for how they would get the benefit from that work. And now they sort of lose the value they had invested in it. That's what they sort of say. So yeah, I think it's good that people have more access to information and be more inspired, like you say, when you go to the museum. But I do know that they are sometimes feeling very upset about it. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think, there's maybe a more general thing, which is now as AI is becoming more powerful, more and more people feel that like, hey, I had an advantage in the market. I knew how to illustrate, truncate, write codes or whatever. And it's very uncomfortable to realize that you don't have this advantage anymore. I think for many people, that's very much the story of our times, isn't it? There is a question from Andre: if we have a skill to convert Figma files into React natives. I don't know, because I don't really do a lot of this front-end stuff. Anyone else does? Not can do some research and get back to you. All right, I'll take a look because I'm curious, but I just don't know enough about this Figma and front-end stuff. And next question is for to port the slide skill to GitHub Copilot, what would change? The answer is nothing. What matters is the model. I use GitHub Copilot a lot. Actually, I used Claude today, but I more commonly use GitHub Copilot or open code with my GitHub Copilot subscription. It has access to the Claude models and also other models. I've used this skill with the Gemini 3 models, and it works great. And I've used it with the GPT models, and it works great. And GitHub Copilot has access to all these things. You can use it from within Visual Studio Code or some other IDs as an extension, and they now also have a CLI that is pretty much a clone code. So yeah, it would work. I know for a fact because I've used these skills with these models and with GitHub Copilot. I know for a fact that it works great.
Thanks, Eleanor. That's super helpful. Can I ask one more question?
Nice.
Is there a way? How do I know? Because I want to call whatever model Copilot uses. I want to call that via an API. Is there a way to know what model it uses so I can call it via an API? Or how do I find out? I know there's this Azure API, and then they came up with these models API, which I saw in the marketplace, but I don't know I don't know which model it actually uses and how and when.
So how are you using Copilot?
Just from the, in Visual Studio, that's it.
All right. So if you're using it, let me actually start Visual Studio. So if you're using Visual Studio, you have something like this, right? And you have here the different models. And so you can choose which one, and they have many more models. I disable many of them that I'm never using them. But you have the Claude one, of course, Sonnet, Opus, which I don't even turn on because it's too expensive for me. And the Gemini ones and GPT. So these are just the same models you would have in the API. If you're using it on Azure, then it's called Foundry on Azure. And they'll have the same model names. You just need to find the exact string. And so, again, depends which one you select here, and you can select different ones depending on the task. And you'll find the exact same model on Azure or on the provider's API. Except for Gemini. Gemini you don't have on Azure, right? So in Azure, they currently host the OpenAI models. They also host the Anthropic models as of very recently. The Gemini ones are only available directly from Google.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't see that model selector there in the VS Code that I have at work. I'll have another look. Maybe there's a way to disable that as an admin. I have no idea. But I'll have it.
That's possible. I mean, I know that if you're in enterprise deployment, the administrator will have some control, and so you can ask them if you need access to more models, but it will already indicate at least this one model you have access to.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining.